Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the Symphonium Crimson right here. And this is a fairly high-end IEM that has made a lot of waves on HeadPhi and a number of other forums. A lot of enthusiasts seem to be all about this one, and I can see why. But it's not without its issues. So in this video, we're going to take a look at that. All right, so this is actually going to be a little bit of a quicker video, but just before we get going here, I want to give you a quick disclaimer that this unit right here is actually the demo unit, I believe, from CanJam SoCal. So it's the one that if you heard it at CanJam SoCal, well, this is one of the demo units that was being demoed. But I just want to make sure it's clear that I don't have like the full packaging and all the rest of the stuff that comes with it. I do have here the case. This is sort of the puck style case that Symphonium does, and I think they do a good job of it. But personally, I prefer cases like these that are, the leather style where you can kind of just throw them into a backpack and you don't need to worry about the sort of metal case itself damaging other stuff in your backpack or your bag or whatever, right? But of course, that's just a personal thing. For the IEM itself, all right, so this is the shell design right here. And in my opinion, this looks incredible. It's got this sort of red around the edge, and then the inside here is what looks like sort of a crushed carbon fiber faceplate with a couple of sort of red tinge accents to it. It looks really, really cool in my opinion. Now with the shell design, I think there are a lot of questions, of course, about how the fit and the comfort is, because the Helios, which is sort of the big IEM release that put Symphonium on the map, at least, for a lot of us, that was a particularly difficult IEM to wear for long periods of time, and it had a nozzle that made it difficult to be used by a wide range of people. I am happy to report that the nozzle and the shape and the shell design for the Crimson here is significantly better. So they basically learned from the previous, like the early Helios release, and their more recent releases have all been, totally fine ergonomically. And I find the same thing is true with the Crimson. It's really comfortable to wear for a long period of time. In fact, this is an IEM that for the past 2 weeks I've sort of been dailying up until I've started using another IEM here. I'll talk a little bit about this one in a little bit. But the Crimson has given me no issues as far as the ergonomics and the comfort is concerned. Now, what is the configuration here? Well, it's been a bit tricky to figure that out, but I will say I believe that this uses 4 balanced armatures for the driver configuration, and that doesn't sound like a lot. I think people need to realize that it's not about the driver count, it's about the implementation, it's about the tuning. I think there are probably a lot of people who falsely assume that more drivers equals more better, and that's just not the case. As we'll see, for the most part with the Symphonium Crimson, you don't really need that many to be able to achieve something pretty interesting, let's just say that. So, how does this sound? Well, I will tell you, but just before I do, let us know if this is the kind of content that you want to see, or let us know if you'd rather see more over-ear stuff, more noise-canceling stuff. I'd love to know what you guys want from us, essentially. And if you find any of this valuable, consider subscribing. That basically tells us if what we're doing here is the right thing, and it also makes me smile. So, anyways, for the Symphonium Crimson, the sound here is mostly very good. So for the bass and the mids, it's exceptional. I can't really think of anything else that I would want in bass quality. And it's really surprising that they're able to do this with just balanced armature drivers. Again, that's something that often is, dynamic drivers are used for, to get higher bass, more bass, etc. But the way that the bass is handled here, it's not more bass. It's that it's in the right spot, for where the bass lift is into the sub bass. And that is, in my view, really well done, really tastefully done. It does not intrude into the mids or into the lower mids or get bloated or muddy or anything like that. And in fact, if you're listening to this IEM with music that doesn't fully token the full frequency range, I imagine it'll actually sound a little bit on the lean side, because the bass is focused more towards the sub bass and is really distinct sounding as a result, but that's only for music that fully tokens the full frequency range, all the way down into the sub bass. So in that respect, it is exceptional bass, but it is not necessarily the most versatile bass. And I think this is a trade-off that folks just need to be aware of. For the mids, once again, if I'm nitpicking, there's like a tiny bit of a reduction in energy, in the lower mids, but that also helps keep the rest of the mid-range extremely clear and clean sounding. I love the mid-range on this IEM. So it really does a great job of ensuring that, stringed instruments and vocals come through with the appropriate clarity. Then we get into the treble, and this is where I think the Crimson is going to be hit and miss. This one, for me, the treble is a little bit of a miss here. I think it is a little too bright and too zingy in the upper treble. So like 10K and above. And you can see there's a couple of resonances there in the graph. So for the folks who prefer something with a bit more crispness and upper treble and zing, this one might even still be a little bit too much for those people. That's really what this is indicating here. And this is actually a trend that I think is not so great in IEMs, at least for the majority of them, that oftentimes they'll kind of go for broke with the treble extension. And maybe this is just a function of, more expensive IEMs being catered to older listeners who can afford to buy them where their hearing rolls off. I don't know if that's true. That's pure conjecture. I could be totally wrong about that. But for some reason, IEMs have been going crazy in the upper treble, and this one is no exception. So if you are used to that, if you're comfortable with that, then this isn't going to be that out of keeping with that trend. My feedback for Symphonium is I think that they can do a little bit of a better job evening out the treble response, and it can still be that sort of fun U-shaped kind of presentation with extra sub bass and extra upper treble, but let's tone it down just a little bit on the treble. That's basically how I'm going to think about this one. And that's not to say that it's all that sibilant, because again, the elevation is more focused towards the upper treble, so it's more like the air frequencies up there, but that does impart a certain unnaturalness to, cymbal hits and things like that. So that's basically all that I have to say about the sound quality of the Crimson here. As far as, the subjective descriptions of the experience, it's spacious sounding, it's punchy and engaging. Despite being balanced armatures, it is extremely revealing for the fine gradations of volume and the trailing ends of tones. I just love that about it. So overall, for the technical qualities, let's call it, they've done an exceptional job here. However, if you would like an additional perspective on this IEM, check out Listener's review. I'll link that in the description. He wrote an article, and that's up on headphones.com. Now, one other thing that I want to mention is that tip rolling is going to be a good idea for this one. And the reason I mentioned tip rolling is this is one way that you can sort of curb some of that treble response if you do find it to be too bright. And so I had a little bit more luck with some foam tips that I was using. I don't have a particular recommendation for the type of tips, just that foam tips did help for me. That's going to be a little bit on a case-by-case basis for the individual as well, because a lot of it is determined by the insertion depth and the fit. Now, just some comparisons here. Compared to the Helios, I actually think the treble was done better on the Helios, but I think just about everything else is done better on the Crimson. Compared to the U6T from 64 Audio, I prefer the sound signature of the U6T. The U6T is actually one of those sort of surprising ones that does a great job of that U-shaped presentation without being quite so fatiguing in the upper treble. Once again, and then stepping up to the U12T from 64 Audio again with another balanced armature configuration. The U12T is a little bit more relaxed in the upper mids, but then it also does have that upper treble zing as well. So comparing the two here, I would say that the Crimson actually leans a little bit more neutral than the U12T, whereas the U12T leans a little bit more warm. Just that they both also have that kind of U-shaped presentation with the sub bass and the treble focus. Between the two, I prefer, again, the mids and the bass on the Crimson, but then I prefer most of the treble on the U12T. But I think for most people, the Crimson's ear gain level is going to be really solid. So that's basically all I have to say about the Crimson. For my money, I prefer the Meteor and that style of tuning that they go with, which is a little bit more relaxed there. It works better with my HRTF. The Crimson, it's really solid for the vast majority of it, and I think for a lot of people, this is going to be a real winner. It doesn't do so well in the treble for me and my HRTF. I can definitely tell there are some imbalances in there, and it is just too much energy in the treble for my liking. And I'd love to see Symphonium come out with another one that doesn't go for broke quite as much in the treble as this one does. Anyways, that does it for this video. Once again, if you're interested in an additional perspective on this one from Listener, check that out in the description. There's an article there, and I've also posted the measurements of this one up on the Headphone community forum. There's a whole thread there where folks are weighing in as well. And join us on Discord. That's obviously where you can talk to me and other like-minded audio folks. And that does it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.